Good morning on a beautiful June 16th in Valley Forge Park. My name is Tom O'Donnell and I'm the director of the Galloway Valley Forge Philadelphia area run walk program. So before we do our run today, we have the privilege of having a guest speaker, Joanna. I hope that's about right.
It is perfect.
Okay. And I invited Joanna out here because I heard her talk a little while ago at a running store. And she described all of these incidences of running maladies that I had, and she said people shouldn't have any. She didn't know me, I didn't know her, but I'm like, I don't know if I can really believe this lady, because she's just telling me there's easy solutions to all of my problems, which were nausea, lack of energy, getting dehydrated, blah, blah, blah. And as it turned out, I spoke to her later, and we got together, and she was totally correct, and I learned that as much as I thought I knew about hydration, electrolytes, nutrition, I was like a first grader. And she straightened me out in a couple of sessions, and it really, for me, turned my whole running attitude around, because I was...
You were going to quit. You're like, oh, I'm getting old, and this is just that, it's just going to all go downhill from here.
That's what I really thought. And I probably whined to Jack
well, you
Jack
whined
about
to
that.
me about, you were like done with ultras, and like, forget it, I'm done.
Yeah,
and then like after the second session, you're like, oh, I think I'm going to do a 100-miler again. I think I'm all ready.
That's
like,
how crazy it was. So everything kind of rolled back for me just based on some simple principles that I had to put into practice. So that's my pitch for her, but here's another pitch. We had an 8-mile run last week, as you recall, in that range, 8 to 10. And it was the first really hot, kind of humid day for us as a group. And some of us had trouble. And 8 miles, we're talking like hour and a half, 2-hour range. Not, we're talking about a third of the distance the marathoners are going to run. And already we were having problems, some of us particularly, with dehydration and getting pooped and blah, blah, blah. So all the more important that she's here today at this time, because we're, like I said, next week we're going 10 miles. So listen up and try to absorb what you can on this, because it's really, really important. I'd love to have a season when no one barfs. And that would be like a real, that sounds terrible to be saying on a video, and I'm kind of exaggerating, as you all know.
But it's true.
Yeah.
That is one sign of dehydration. It's not everybody's, but I had one client that she had none of the other 18 signs except for that one.
That's a bad one.
And it's a bad one, but
like
inevitably it was correctable.
And it doesn't mean that once you've done that, you've joined the club.
That's the club we don't want you to join. Like you don't get brownie points for that one. It's just embarrassing and uncomfortable.
So we'll do this. That's a great segue. I'm going to get out of the way and turn this over to Joanna, and then we'll share with you, ask questions, then I'll go for a little run.
Yes,
okay.
That's good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for that beautiful introduction.
You're welcome.
And I'm Joanna, Nutrition and Motion. Basically, what I do is I help athletes do their thing better. So it's all about improving the performance. This past week I was actually talking to a running group about why dieting doesn't help your running. So there's all these aspects of sports nutrition, and being an athlete too for since forever. I've gone through some of the issues that you've gone through, and putting the pieces together, it's not just you read something in a book and you're done. I have a link on my website for the signs of dehydration. There's at least 18 of them. You might have 1 or 2 of them. You might have 1. You might have, several of them. My job is to help you understand what are your signs of dehydration, what is that you can do to prevent those signs of dehydration, and then if you actually get some of them then what do you do about it? So it's really different. Last year, I think I worked with 7 people doing either the Marine Corps Marathon or Philly Marathon. 7 different people, similar issues, but 7 different protocols. So everyone was completely different. And even though, let's say, one person needed 1,000 milligrams of sodium per hour to replenish, each one had a different way of how they could actually take it in. One was okay with some kind of chicken broth, another person wanted V8, another person something else, and another was doing all supplement based. So it's really, sports nutrition is kind of an art and a science. And I put more of the art in there than just the science, because a lot of stuff goes on too when you're actually moving and running, and your body doesn't actually have always the cognizance of knowing what's going on. So just running through some of the symptoms is what I'm going to try to do, and then give you some ideas of how to kind of prevent it and how to start paying attention to some of those signs and symptoms, and then what you can do so that you can actually enjoy the run for a lot longer, as opposed to just petering out. And like Tom had said earlier, it's an age thing. It's not an age thing. It's just a we don't know thing. So it's once you start knowing what your signs of dehydration are, then you can actually start making the adjustments. And I can make those adjustments for you a lot quicker, just because, one, I've been doing it for a really long time, and two, you know, I've been a triathlete for 28 years, maybe even longer, and I've experienced a lot of those things. So it's something where my personal experience, as well as working with clients for over 14 years, kind of, I can put the pieces together a little bit faster. I also brought some handouts too, if you guys want to take those with you, that actually has some of those signs of dehydration. But that's one of the things. Now it's June. This morning it's like the perfect temperature of to run. When, like last week, it was a lot hotter on one of the days, or 2 weeks ago. Your body's not adjusted to the heat and humidity, so a lot of times you have to actually take in a little bit more sodium and a lot more of the electrolytes, just until your body is acclimated to the temperatures. And the longer that you go, the more you get depleted, and you only have so many sodium stores. Once you kind of run through those sodium stores, then you probably have, you know, half hour before all the signs and symptoms starts creeping in. So some of those signs and symptoms, and these are just the general ones, I'm not going to go through 18 of them because we don't have time for that. But the most common ones are the slight nausea, slight headache. You start feeling like you're just overheating and you can't cool down. Muscle cramping. Your legs feel really heavy. You just don't have the energy to keep going. You kind of want to go like sit under a tree and just lay down and just kind of take a nap. A lot of times those are the basic signs of dehydration. We talked about the throwing up is another one. A lot of times you've also got this despondency, like you just don't care. You start getting grumpy and start getting really kind of angry with your running buddies too. And everybody has all sorts of ideas of what may be going on. You know, the fatigue, everybody thinks it's they need more calories, where it might be that you're just dehydrating. So you actually need to take in more electrolytes. So it's trying to understand what's happening. And when you're moving, you're also creating endorphins. Endorphins are a great painkiller. So they actually end up you can't feel sometimes until you're 2% dehydrated that you're actually dehydrated. So you have to start being hyper aware of some of the symptoms and conditions that you have, and start understanding, well, what are those symptoms and what do they mean to me? Because everybody here, there's 25 of you. You might have all 25 different symptoms, but some of them are going to be similar. So a lot of it is trying to, 24 hours beforehand, if you're a heavy sweater, you want to actually start sodium loading and putting more of those electrolytes in the day before. Adding some sodium and extra sea salt with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know, same thing with the morning of, if you're going to be eating beforehand. And then you want to be able to take whatever kind of sodium or electrolyte supplement with you. A lot of times it's not just what fluids you can put into your water bottle, but it's actually putting in more of the electrolyte salts into the water bottle. There's salt tabs, there's Endurolites, there's all sorts of, and there's the fizzy Noon tablets and the fizzy Endurolite tablets. They're kind of like an Alka-Seltzer, they just fizz into your bottle. These are all electrolyte options that people can use. My job is not to put you on a specific one, but the one that works for you best. So, and putting it in the right combination to kind of help with the symptoms that you have. So you're trying to preload a little bit the day before, then in the morning of, and then kind of make sure that you have some of those electrolytes every hour to kind of keep those symptoms from coming on. The next, you also want to pay attention to how do you feel 30 minutes after your run, or an hour after, because when those endorphins wear off, which is typically about half hour after you're finishing your run, you might start getting the muscle tightness. You might start getting like your hamstrings are so tight, you go to stretch it and then your quad locks up, you know. You might get the stiffness in the neck and the shoulders and then the hips. Those are all electrolyte depletion issues. You might be really, really tired then. That's when you're gonna know those are your signs of dehydration creeping in, because now that the endorphin high has disappeared. Does that make sense? So you want to start paying attention, not just during your run, but how do you feel afterwards? You know, there's also a whole balance of what to take in terms of calories as well. If you take in too many calories and too much sugar, that actually blocks your body's ability to absorb some of the electrolytes. Something like Gatorade or Powerade, you know, depending on what event you're doing, you want to start practicing taking in some of those fluids and the electrolyte solutions that are on the course, because you want to rule out whether you can or cannot use that product first before you have to take your own stuff and bring your own powders. And sometimes that can be messy and it can be cumbersome. But if you can't deal with Gatorade at all, and that's what they have on the course, then we have to find you something else that'll work. And I use a company called Infinite Nutrition for a lot of my sports drinks, because you can actually customize the blend to the flavor, whether you want an endurance blend or a speed blend, and adjust the amount of electrolytes in there. If you want to know what your electrolyte, like your sweat testing is, or how much sodium and electrolytes you're actually sweating out, there's a company in Westchester called Levelin.com, and they will send you a little packet. You stick a little pad on your forearm, and then you go run for an hour and you track, you know, what you drank and how much you weighed before and after. Send it in, and they actually give you a full report on how much sodium and how many electrolytes you actually lose in an hour, so that then you can actually put a better protocol together in terms of what's necessary. There's also on my website a sweat rate test that you can do, that you can basically generally do that sweat rate test yourself and find out how many fluids you're actually losing per hour, and then you can kind of work backwards from that, or I can help you work backwards from that and put the plan together. So depending on how heavy of a sweater you are and how many symptoms of the dehydration you actually have, it might make sense to actually schedule some time to go over what you're doing to optimize the plan so that you actually feel better. If you start getting some of those symptoms of dehydration and you start getting the muscle cramps, you start getting the nausea, you have to have the electrolytes with you. You have to have something concentrated with you. A lot of times I have these cute little holders. You can put your pills into here, and at least you have it with you. So if you have an issue with cramping, you start having the nausea, you start having the fatigue, you can take whatever capsules you have with you. You can take one or two, and if it doesn't go away in 5 to 10 minutes, then you pretty much know it's not a dehydration issue and it's something else. I now use this base salt. It's a powder, and it's basically looks like Himalayan sea salt, but it's a little bit more amped up than that. It really works great. And this is another one where it's quick, it's easy, you can fit it into a pocket. And when you get the signs of dehydration, you take your shot and wait 5 minutes, and all the issues typically go away. Well, the way that they suggest is you lick your finger, stick it on the end, you know, and then lick your finger. To me, it's like I need more than that, so I kind of have figured out what the dosage is. They have this teeny tiny little scoop that comes with this. So I basically just dump it in and go and swig it with extra water. But if those signs don't go away in 5 to 10 minutes, and it usually does, with your extra shot of electrolytes, then it's probably not a dehydration issue, and we have to figure out what that next step is. Does that make sense? Anybody have any issues? Like what you said, it was 2 weeks ago that a lot of people had issues?
Last week, yeah.
Last week. So what kind of symptoms did some of you have that weren't favorable? Like you didn't really like feeling that way?
I'll get a headache after doing even a short run if I don't have my electrolytes right.
Yeah.
And it'll be for the entire day.
Right, and that's the, you know, so what are you doing in terms of electrolytes?
If I remember that I have salt caps or I take the hammer endurance, then I usually have a
Okay, but what, now for during the run, are you taking anything?
Oh, last week I did, but the week before I didn't, so that's where I ended up with the headache.
Yeah. So, and when you get that headache, was it afterwards or during the run?
After.
After. So after that's one of the things. It's like afterwards, it still is a sign of dehydration, and it's easy enough to, you know, if you have your electrolytes, your endurolytes, or whatever it is, or your base salts or salt tabs. If you have them with you, you can just take that, and it's not a big deal. You could just stop at, you know, any old Wawa or fast food stuff and grab a little packet of sodium as well and see if that helps. But having the balanced electrolyte powder is typically better. Just it's better absorbed, and it keeps the levels better. You could eat higher sodium foods too, which a lot of, you know, there's also that balance of if you eat higher sodium foods, then you're also going to sweat out more sodium. So there's this fine balance of trying to understand what my body needs and what it doesn't need. And do you need more sodium-based foods just the day before, or do you need them, you know, during the whole week? And it's about looking at these runs, even during the week when it gets hot, which we're getting into that season of hot. You want to make sure that you're fueling yourself properly before all of your runs. So if you're going in the morning and you're going for 6 miles, you know, that could be an hour, that could be an hour and a half. If you're a speed demon, it's less than that. But you're going for quite some time, and you probably have enough electrolyte stores for probably an hour. But you might need to supplement with something before you go. Don't always wait till you have a symptom in order to fix the symptom. We want to do some preventive nutrition. So if you go and you have symptoms, then it's time to kind of document, well, what happened? What do I do next time? Next time I try to, you know, increase some of my electrolytes, and maybe we can talk about which electrolytes are going to be best for you, and in what quantity. Then you try that out, and then you know, you don't change anything except for that. Did you have other symptoms instead? You know, so then we work on those symptoms, because every run is a little bit different, and it's an opportunity to learn, how does my body work in the heat and humidity? How does my body work when I go longer? And it's about trying to find that protocol that if you're not drinking enough water, or if you're only drinking water, you're actually sweating out your electrolytes, plus you're flushing them out. So just water on longer runs isn't enough. On a 1 hour run, water's probably going to be fine. But it's trying to find that balance of how much of what do I really need. And when you're running, there's also a limit of how much you can take in, period. You know, so if on paper it says you need, you know, 60 ounces of water an hour, well, that's just not going to happen. You know, you want to have a minimum of 16 ounces or 14 ounces per hour, which most of you have the smaller 8-ounce bottles that you're carrying on your fanny packs. So that's, if they're 8 ounces, that's 16. So you want to do that much liquid on your runs, minimum per hour, especially when it gets hot and humid. Right now it's not that hot and humid, so you could probably go with those two for an hour and a half and not worry about it. But it's about trying to start paying attention to, what do I need? What am I taking in? If you need a lot more sodium, then or a lot more liquids per hour, then start increasing it a little bit at a time. But don't go from like 8 ounces an hour to 26 ounces an hour. You're probably just going to feel everything sloshing in your stomach, and that's not going to be absorbed either. And when you're running, your body doesn't want to absorb a lot of things. You know, it's a lot of stress on the body, and when the body's stressed, it has a harder time absorbing nutrients as well as the fluids. So it's about trying to put in some of the extra electrolytes so that the body can actually absorb those fluids adequately. Make sense? Yes.
So, never before did I have cramps in my legs when I was running, but on the very hot days, doing the hill repeats, I started to get them. So I talked to Tom and Jack, and they said, oh, you need the salt tab. So I've been using those.
Yeah.
And that has helped tremendously, even though I have none in my bottle.
Right.
Something's happened this year that my body's different. And what was interesting, like last week when it was hot and humid,
right,
I did 11 miles with 10 hill repeats.
Right.
I came back and all I wanted was salty crackers. I mean, I was just craving salt.
Yeah, and a lot of times the cravings are an indication that you need more too.
So I was just sort of saying, the fact that I came back and I couldn't eat any fruit or anything sweet, I just like, I need salt. I need it now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting how that works. And a lot of times I'll bring mineral water because that's actually a little bit more salty, or get some club soda because that's a little bit more salty than the other things. But the hill repeats, it's a higher intensity, so a lot of times you actually use up a little bit more of the electrolytes just because of the higher intensity. And then add heat and humidity that you might not be used to, and the body just kind of needs a little extra oomph. So, yeah, interesting stuff. So you learn as you go forward. You have a question?
So on Thursday, I ran at like 10:30 in the morning, which it was.
You got to run at 10:30 in the morning on a weekday? That's awesome. I want that.
It's my daughter's last day of school, so
Yeah,
I
okay.
did work someone, and then I was like, I'm gonna go do a run.
Right.
But it was like 80. I mean.
Yeah, it was warm
I
on
didn't
Thursday.
run that far.
Right.
I ran like 3 miles because I was trying to test out some new shoes, and I got done, and I was kind of like, I'm really not feeling that good. Like,
Yeah, and that might be that
I had
dehydration.
water, but like,
Right.
I was like, I mean, I ate. It's not like I'm like, normally I get up and run without having eaten anything first. But,
Yeah. Well, so something like that. It could be a combination because the feeling kind of punky. Depending on when you got up and when you ran, that could be slight dehydration. It could be actually low blood sugar as well. That's another article on my website. The difference between the two. But there are the dehydration things. Like if you're used to running first thing in the morning, it's been cool in the morning, so big deal. You can go for about 45 minutes to an hour with nothing if you go, within a half hour, 45 minutes of waking up. But if you're waiting 3 or 4 hours, you probably need to eat something to balance that blood sugar, and you probably need to add some of those electrolytes and the fluids to make that run a lot easier later in the morning. But it's trying to understand, is it low blood sugar, is it dehydration, is it a combination of the two, and is it my body's just not used to the heat and humidity yet. And there are ways to kind of fix it and know what to do ahead of time. But that's kind of, like I said, the art and the science of sports nutrition. It's trying to understand what's my body telling me that I really need, and then being able to do that when you're ready to go move your body.
Two things before we run. One is another issue we've had come up at Galloway, emphasizes a lot, is drinking too much water and then experience this hyponatremia, which is actually deadly. That's one thing to discuss, and then let everybody know how they can reach you, and then we'll go out and do our run.
So hyponatremia, I've actually experienced hyponatremia too. And I did that one in my Ironman race almost 20 years ago. So hyponatremia is basically when I had mentioned this earlier, when you're just drinking water, you're basically flushing the electrolytes out, and then you're sweating the electrolytes out at the same time. So you're basically accelerating the dehydration aspect, or the dehydration process, because you're sweating out the electrolytes plus you're dehydrating. And flushing the electrolytes out. So too much water basically just gets you all waterlogged, and the sodium levels and the electrolyte levels just get too filtered, so to speak, and too diluted, that your body starts to shut down, and it basically accelerates the rate of dehydration. And dehydration can be a serious thing, that the more dehydrated you become, you could actually get lightheaded, you can pass out, you can fall into a coma. There was an athlete, I don't know how many years ago, but it was one of the really, really hot, stinking races. And this is the power of the mind. If you want to keep going, you will keep going. Even though you're weaving and you can hardly stay straight, your mind says, but I want to get over there, so it just can keep going. And you're taking in water because you need fluids. You're pouring it on your head because you want to cool down. But this guy ended up falling into a coma for, I think it was like 5 days. Literally, I mean, it was that serious. his body was shutting down on every level. The kidneys, the liver, he actually lost hearing because of that electrolyte imbalance, and a lot of it was because he just took in too many fluids and didn't know that he was dehydrating, and the power of the mind just got him to keep moving forward. So the hyponatremia is just as serious, but it speeds up the dehydration process. So try to limit the fluid intake to 20 ounces per hour, unless you know that you're a really heavy sweater. But make sure you've got the electrolytes with it. Don't just take in water. And same thing with the days leading to your longer runs. You know, the day before, start taking. You know, you can take in more fluids, but if you're taking in twice as much water as you normally do, you're already flushing the electrolytes out, and you're actually starting your run the next day with in a state of dehydration. So if you're going to increase the fluid intake the day before, trying to hydrate for your next event the next morning, you want to take in the electrolytes along with it, at least 2-3 times a day with that extra water intake. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And this might be the easier way. That's how you contact me. It's nutritioninmotion.net, and I have some cards, and I have some brochures, and I have some handouts. So if you want to get a hold of me, it's 215-272-6774, nutritioninmotion.net. And it's Joanna Hodorowska, Nutrition in Motion. So if you have any questions, contact me. I'm also on Facebook, so that's another easy way to get a hold of me. And then you can just ask me any questions during our run today, or anytime later this week, or when you come up with a problem and go, I don't know how to do this. Maybe Joanna will have the answer, and usually I do. So thank you for coming, and let's go run.